symbol will live, and
That's
we are
right.
live. Hi everyone, and I'm here today with for this live taping of Papa PhD with Krishna P. Kadiyala. I'm going to introduce her a little bit more in depth later. But hey, Krishna, super happy to be with you today on online live to talk about this question that hasn't been it's been touched upon in different interviews, but I haven't had an interview talking specifically at length on the challenges and are things turning for the better in October of 2021 for women in STEM, for women in research, for women in computer science, engineering, etc. So I'm super happy to have you here.
Well, hello, and thank you so much for having me. I am very excited to be here too. I'm
Yeah,
nervous too, but I'm very excited.
being nervous is fine, I think if you've listened to any of the interviews
Yeah,
that I do,
I have.
it's relaxed.
Yes,
There's
yes.
no there's no pressure of any kind, and really, my idea and my objective when I sit with someone is to listen to their message and try to get some more elements to their story,
Hmm.
and always in the context and always in the scope of helping people who are in research, who are doing their PhD,
Yes,
which we're going to talk about
and that's
because
actually how I found you, your
yeah.
podcast. So yes,
Yeah, so just before we start, to give people
right.
time, I don't know if they are waiting for the time. uh do you can you tell me how things are these days over there, COVID wise, safety measures, etc.
Yes.
Here things
Um,
are changing. Here in Montreal are changing. Travel is easier.
mhm.
There's this question of the vaccine pass.
Right.
That's a big question, and that
Mm,
gets a lot of ink running.
right.
But I think in terms of numbers, we're good here.
Yes,
So,
we're surprisingly good here. Um, Especially, I think for me, the biggest concern was with the kids and
of course.
them going back to school. And it's like, okay, how are the numbers? And in schools, thankfully, they have been really good. At least the place where we live,
Hmm.
they've been really good with keeping track about cases and their if something's not going well or there's an increase in the number of cases, they take the time, they make an effort to say, okay, we have to bump up. Please make sure maybe your kids should use the masks, or they're not mandating things, but that's good. They're
Hmm.
giving you the option. They're keeping you informed, and I very much appreciate that. As you know, so I'm in person. I teach every day in person,
Hmm.
but for us in my university, we do have a mask mandate.
Okay.
Um, but things have been really good, and so almost everybody here in my institution is also like super happy that things have been very slow.
Hmm. That's good.
Um, and I hear travel has it's been easier comparatively, I think. The only difference or the only catch there is for international travel. It's it's a little bit hickey, I think.
Okay.
But yes,
So,
especially I think, yeah. Sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, no. I was going to ask you, because people might be listening or watching from
Mhm.
different places, where you are, because we're talking. I'm in Montreal,
Yes,
Canada.
yes. I'm in Flower Mound, Texas, USA.
Okay. And
Yes.
at what institution?
I'm at Texas Christian University. It's a private school in Fort
Perfect.
Worth, Texas.
Very good. Okay, so I think things are going well. We're live on the different platforms. I was just telling people here on Twitter that we are live, and that's done. So I think now we can actually start the interview, the Papa PhD interview.
Great.
And if you allow me, I'll just start by introducing you quickly, and then we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you.
And so again, the theme today is, are things changing for the better for women in STEM, for women in research, for women in science? We could change that final
Yeah.
women in to many things, but that's the point. So
That's right.
let me just pull up here your bio. So, welcome to this new episode and this new Papa PhD interview. Today, I'm interviewing Krishna Kadiyala. Krishna is an assistant professor of computer science at Texas Christian University. Prior to starting her PhD journey, she was senior network engineer at AT&T Labs in Middletown, New Jersey for 3 years. During Krishna's PhD candidature, she also mothered two beautiful girls. Krishna is passionate about learning, teaching, and helping girls in computer science, and is an advocate for PhD moms and moms with young kids in academia. Krishna, welcome to this Papa PhD interview.
Thank you, David. That sounds really good.
Well,
Thank you.
my pleasure, and my pleasure to have you here. And as I'm super happy that we connected on LinkedIn, and that we're here talking about this question of being a woman in science and research, being a mom in science and research. I think that's even more specific. But the hashtag women in STEM is
Mhm.
one that exists, and it exists for a reason. So I'm super grateful that you're here today, so we can have this conversation.
And I'm super thankful that you had me here. It's just wonderful to be able to talk about it, and I think we need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. So just to begin, what would be one thing that you would add to the short bio kind of that I gave of you, so listeners can get to know who Krishna is a little bit better?
Um, I've recently become an I am remarkable facilitator,
Okay.
and it's a Google initiative, but I think it is very applicable or very important that a lot of people find more information about this initiative and do the workshop, because it helps you build your confidence to
Hmm.
speak up about your accomplishments. And
Hmm.
I have not never been good at that. So it's just another small way that I try to help. So it's not just helping students or helping women in coursework and finding what their careers are, but it's just
Hmm.
saying, okay, you should learn and practice to stand up, acknowledge your accomplishments, and be able to speak up about them.
Hmm.
Yes.
Oh, I have a message here from
Okay.
someone you probably know. Do you know?
Oh yes, it's Bing. Yes, that's my
Go
colleague, Dr.
Krishna.
Bing Young Wei. Yes.
Who says go
Thank
Krishna.
you.
This is the marvel for me of now this in season 3 of
Mhm.
Papa PhD of doing this live, is having the possibility of having these little interactions with which I think
Yes.
enrich the experience.
I did not know that could happen. So, and I'm very excited that Dr. Bing Young Wei is watching us.
There you go. See,
Yes.
now this sounds really interesting, and I guess that coming on a podcast is can probably be part of this of using these skills that you've learned there at Google.
Yes.
Because you told me at the beginning you weren't aware that we were going to be live, so there's a little bit of stress
Yes.
there, but I
That,
think you'll see that it's just fine. And now with people cheering you from the stands, it's even better, right?
yes, that's true. And I have to add here, there's so in my commute, I listen to audiobooks, and those are my newfound love.
Hmm.
And I was listening to this book about imperfectionism and how you should embrace it, and
Hmm.
not try to be a perfectionist, which is very hard because that's how I am. And this line that popped up from the other Brene Brown, PhD again,
Hmm.
is to own your story and talk about it, right? Because there's others who are in similar situations, similar problems, maybe similar obstacles, and when you hear someone talk about what they have been through or what's going on and how they overcame, it's just so much more hopeful for you.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting. I've heard this thing of I hadn't heard the term imperfectionism before, but there's this guy. I think it's Chris Kremitzos, I think he's called, and it's in the space of podcasting, and
Hmm.
he wrote this book which is called Start Ugly,
Oh,
and which
interesting.
which means if you, I think the message behind it is, if you want to be too much of a perfectionist at the beginning of a project, you may be, putting sticks in your wheels in terms of getting the project launched.
Right.
And
Right.
he actually practiced what he wrote by creating this great, during COVID, during the confinement, this online meeting of podcasters, really, really big, really big organization.
Mm-hmm.
But he started ugly in a way, meaning that there was things that he learned on the way, and once he launched, there was adjustments, and
Mm-hmm.
there's some aspect of like imperfectionism, like you said, to it. So I find it interesting that you bring that up, and it's true that often, if you get to the PhD, perfectionism might be a trait that you bring with you
Yes.
into the experience and out of the
Right.
experience. So I'd be glad, actually. I'd be glad for you to share this book, and I can even, if we remember to do this, uh,
Yes.
put it in the show notes.
Yes, I will actually. I was going to also suggest the book. It's wonderful, especially I think for people who are type A personalities, or if you're trying, I I still am, but I've learned to let go of some of the things and say, okay, it's okay to not try and be perfect all the time, every
Hmm.
time.
Yeah. So now, about what brings us here today. So we know we connected on LinkedIn, and quickly you told me about how important it was to you to be an advocate for
Hmm.
moms in academia, for PhDs who are moms. Can you just talk a little bit about why, why
Hmm.
you have this interest and this mission that you give yourself of
Yes.
being an advocate?
Yes. Um, so honestly, I think what triggered me to come out and say, okay, I think everybody needs help, and I should do something about it is COVID.
Hmm.
Because before COVID, I did sort of kind of have everything together. Yes, sort of struggling to get everything together, but I still held it together. But COVID absolutely just wrecked everything. And
Hmm.
I, I was holding on tight, and everything just went out of control. And in a way, I felt very overwhelmed and alone, and didn't know what to do. Was I the only one? So it's always the question of, am I the only one who's feeling this way? Am I the odd one out? Right. No
Hmm.
matter what your experience is, how you're feeling, it's always like you feel like my students do in class. Maybe I'm the only one who's not grasping this idea here. So I was thinking that way until I started reading some articles that came maybe in higher ed or some other places, but it was about this mother in academia who was struggling because COVID hit, the kids had to stay home, you're
Hmm.
working from home, it's just too much and overwhelming, and of course research slows down, and your and tenure track, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
There's teaching, there's mentoring students, and I'm like, okay, it's probably just not me, right? And I said,
Yeah.
okay, if there are others like me out there, or if there are going to be others like me out there, because with hashtag women in STEM, and there's
Hmm.
so much more support for girls nowadays to go into STEM, to be who you are. I thought of the question, well, is at some point, is this population going to have to choose between having a career in academia or having graduate studies, as opposed to raising a family,
Yeah.
taking care of the kids? Because everything changed when COVID came. I mean, the kids became the top priority.
Of course.
And so, yes, that was the motivation. And I said, okay, I'm going to try and see how I can reach others. Share my story is the first step to, because that's how I felt when I heard someone else who was accomplished in a very good department in a good school say that this is overwhelming. COVID has changed my plans. I'm like, okay, so there's validity for me right there. It's not just
Hmm.
me. And so I said, okay, let's see how we can reach others. How can I help others?
Yeah, I also remember reading articles about how the COVID impacted men and women differently, and basically to do with the invisible burden of that that is raising a family and making a household work
Yes.
more for women than for men typically. Now, but you said you talked about telling your story. So I think it's the moment to go there. People kind of know why we're here,
Yeah.
your motivation, and what got you started in this mission of being an advocate. So yeah, do you want to share maybe one more chapter of your story, or we can start and then you can work through it.
Yes, sure. Um, let's see. You want me to start from the PhD or right after?
Well, I think if a lot of people who are in the PhD and a lot of women during the PhD uh, may be considering having children and maybe considering postponing it for after the PhD.
Hmm.
I remember actually when I was doing my bachelor's, one of the professors in the department where I was, actually I remember hearing him tell his PhD his PhD students that were women that during the PhD is the best moment to have your child. And but I think it's the only person when I go through in my memory of conversations that I heard say that. And this
Hmm.
was years this was years ago. So I think he was quite kind
Yes.
of forward thinking in a way. But then after that, the conversations I've heard are more of I'd better postpone it.
Hmm.
And then the thing is, once you postpone, well, now I'm on my
Yeah.
I'm on my postdoc. I'm on my second postdoc. It's
Never a
a
good time.
that's it. It's never a good time. So I'd say let's start with the PhD. I think uh,
Perfect.
it's a good moment, and also maybe, and we can talk about that later. We'll talk about how the work this professional spaces you've been in. I mentioned AT&T at the beginning.
Hmm.
How being a woman in those in the domain that you are, how that worked, and how that impacted also your, let's say, your balance
Yes.
between work and family, etc. But yeah, let's start at PhD, or just at the transition after the PhD.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So to start off, I think I'm gonna take what you just said and so I did decide. No, let me go back a little. So I do come from a very traditional Indian family,
Mm-hmm.
and having kids was honestly planned even before we got married, I guess. In a way. My dad is a doctor in India, and he was always advocating for, you should have kids young because
Okay.
you need to give your strength to kids, and all of that. Your body has to heal, you have to have the energy to raise these kids and all of that. um, so I knew at some point during my PhD that I would have kids. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
one or two, but I knew that it has to happen. um, and I did have my first child in 2014, and I was just getting started in my thesis, kind of, actual. We had a problem defined. We were getting to
Okay.
work on the actual meat of the thesis and all of that. Um, and it was, I think it totally flipped my priorities. It was
Mm-hmm.
very unexpected. Up until then, I had seen other moms, or I had seen others, and I'm like, okay, I think this is totally manageable. The child's just going to grow. They're tiny. I mean, how much time can they take? How much effort can it be? And then when my first child happened, it just completely flipped my world.
Mm-hmm.
And I deliberately planned to have a second one after a long gap.
Okay.
And I also did decide, like you were just saying, that during the PhD is the best time to have a child.
Mm-hmm.
It might affect how much time you take to finish or to get to graduate, but right after, I think there's too much pressure, too much to do
Mm-hmm.
when if you decide to have right after graduating. So I did take that decision and say, okay, we're going to have the second one right before I graduate. And that's exactly what happened, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
And um and i'm i'm so glad I actually took that decision. And it cognitively, I'm like, okay, I think that was a very sensible thing to do, because now I think about it, after graduating would have been absolutely impossible,
Hmm.
right?
And so this is interesting, and it's funny that we hadn't talked about this. I didn't know exactly the timing that you had your children, and that I told the thing about the professor, and that in the end, that's the reflection you had. I'd really like to maybe for you to expand a little bit on that, on why, on on your point of view, and with your family and with your husband, because I'm sure this was not you didn't decide this on your
Of
own,
course.
right?
Yes.
So what was the rationale behind saying, you know what, I'll do it now? You said you mentioned part of it, which is just after the PhD, a lot of pressure, and like getting a postdoc or
Mhm.
whatever comes after, etc., etc. Um, but what other more practical day to day, or even uh, reflections did you have that brought you to this conclusion of saying, because people might think, well, you're going to have to, like you said, split the time between taking care of
Yes.
the child, and then especially at those first few months after the child is
Mhm.
born. But what reflections, what solutions did you find? How did you manage that? How did you make everything work in the end?
I think one of the biggest shocker for me was that when I had my kids, they somehow became the first, second, and third priorities on my
Of
list,
course.
right?
Mhm.
And I had not anticipated that, very honestly, because I was a very go-to person. Like I would get things done. I was on top of everything. I loved working. I loved studying, learning new topics, and I loved challenges. And when, like I said, I think the first child was sort of uh, just threw all my plans away, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, we need to, I have to readjust now. I don't know how to deal with this new
Yeah.
list. I just didn't know what came over me in a way. And I technically think that not a problem, but I realized how much of a hands-on mom I wanted to be,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So you might find it, or our audience might notice this with a working woman, academia or outside. It's always a very delicate balance of not feeling guilty that you're working, but at the same time, not giving up on the dreams just because you have kids, right? That
Hmm.
balance is just impossible to strike. So I would feel, I realized that, okay, I wanted to be very hands on in terms of, all right, I want to take my kids to experience different things, even though they were just 1 year old maybe. But I still
Hmm.
wanted to say, okay, no, the kid has to go out to the park, experience different weathers. And I'm like, okay, this, I didn't realize that this was so important to me, because you see that I had no prior experience. I was going into un, unknown territory,
Uncharted
and right,
territories, yeah.
uncharted, yes. And so I did not know I was going to be such a hands-on mom. So that was my first challenge. It was me that had changed,
Hmm.
right? And so yeah, so once I realized that that was very important to me as well as my PhD, I just decided to break down my week that way. So Monday to Thursday is work week. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday would be completely with the kid, take her out or do art projects, whatever it is. But that was I think undenied attention to just
Hmm.
her, being with her, being a mom.
Okay.
So that actually helped me not feel guilty Monday to Thursday, right? So
Yeah.
that would be the strength that would say, okay, you're doing everything you can. You're not really walking away, leaving the child alone. So
Yeah.
so it worked on me not feeling guilty and overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And once that phase passed, I knew that, okay, I want to do both. I want to be, I want to have accomplishments, but I also want to have this. If I want a second child, I want to have the same experiences almost. But I knew that if I did plan for a child after graduation, I just didn't have the time. I can't
Hmm.
say in a nine to, and academia is not that, but even in a 9 to 5 job, I can't say, sorry, I have to take my child to the park today or to
Hmm.
go face painting today. It just doesn't work that way, right?
Of
So,
course.
so that was the motivation, because I just learned who I was, how I wanted to mother my kids. And luckily, my husband saw what I was doing. I mean, he could
Hmm.
tell, all right, he's like, okay, I realize how you want to do it. And it was, I was a, I'm a very strong, strong mother, for a better lack of, word. But
Hmm.
I, I, I decide, like, okay, this is what we're going to do this day. And then, luckily my husband just said, okay, let's do that. So yeah, that was essentially it. And we knew from the very beginning, I think, that I would like to go into academia.
Hmm.
Or I should say that was my first option, always.
Okay.
So definitely my husband understood the challenges, because it was only going to get harder. It was not going to get any more easier,
Hmm.
right, than being a student. So yes.
Hmm. So now the question that arises for me is, uh, you've told us about what went on in your head, in your inner universe and in your like family universe, but there's your lab mates, there's your supervisor, there's funding. Can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about that side? Because that's
Yes.
I think what, because I agree with you, once a child arrives in your life, there's something that happens and the priorities like flip. That I agree, and I've gone to a similar experience as a dad.
Yes.
But people who are considering
Hmm.
couples, researcher women researchers that are considering, do I or do I not have my child now? M- some of the obstacles that they might have are of this category of
Yes.
what's happening to my funding. Is my supervisor gonna be happy or not about this? How is this going to impact the lab, etc., etc.? Can
Hmm.
you just talk a little bit about how you navigated
Sure.
that, and how you organized that aspect of things?
Sure thing. I have to say, I'm very thankful that my advisor was very understanding, very
Hmm.
kind person. So, so if you are someone who's considering having kids, there's a bunch of to do things that you have to say, okay, is this checked? Is this checked? Did I make sure this is done before? Because there's so much uncertainty once you get pregnant, and
Hmm.
you don't know how things will go up until the child is maybe a year or so. You just don't know how things are going to go. And that's the first thing you have to realize. It's very uncertain. Nothing is a given.
Hmm.
And yes, funding is a big question when you're a student. So you have to know that your funding opportunities are not going to be taken away or are not going to be impacted because you choose to have children. You have to talk it out with your supervisor first thing. And you kind of get a sense for, okay, how are they, when maybe you see how their journey has been, or you see what kind of students they have mentored, how they
Hmm.
think, what are their views. You get a feel for, okay, are they going to be okay with it, are they going to be not okay with it. And believe it or not, luckily not my advisor, but there was this instance when I was just pregnant with my second child, and you couldn't physically see, that I was
Hmm.
pregnant. And I was at the verge of being offered a position as an adjunct, and I wanted
Okay.
to take some time and do that. Um, and this person almost verbally said, "Okay, wonderful. I like your profile." We met in person, and he said, okay, I'm going to get back in touch with you. We should get this rolling. And I'm so excited, and I'm like, I just wanted to make sure. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, it happens. So I just wanted to make sure that they knew I was not going to be able to start right away.
Okay.
So I happened to mention to them that, hey, okay, I'm actually pregnant. I'm going to be expecting a child, in this month, so I can
Hmm.
start right after. And something just changed. The equation
Hmm.
just changed. So you have to realize that not everybody's going to be supportive,
Of
but that's
course.
not
Yeah.
necessarily your problem, right? I mean, you have to live your life. So
Hmm.
don't shy away from living your life just because somebody else thinks that's not the way you should go about it.
Hmm.
It's very hard to do that because, again, like I said, sometimes you end up feeling alone. You feel like you're the only one. You feel like you made a wrong decision. But no, you have to find someone who you can talk to at that point in time and say, all right, this is what I experienced. Am I at fault here? Because you're not,
Hmm. No,
right?
and I think in the example that you gave, you did the right thing of being open, and
Hmm.
in the end, you did well. You didn't get that position that you wanted, but you avoided the possible stresses of getting into position, then it coming out, appearing that you're pregnant, etc., and being in conflict and being in friction with
Hmm.
this person. So I think that that being open from the outset is a good thing, because it's going to filter, if the team, or if the employer, or if the person who's evaluating you is open for it, then you'll know. If not, the lights are back on. If not, you'll also know, and I think that's good. I've had
Hmm.
someone on the show who also said the same thing, and she was like moving countries to get this position, but luckily, the timing of pregnancy and getting a child was fine for the time frame of the
Yes.
position she was
Yep.
she was getting into. So no, I think it's an interesting point. And yes, culpability, feeling guilty at this moment is putting undue pressure on yourself.
Yes.
But yeah, it can get difficult, though, if let's say, if it's really the position that you want, or if
Yeah.
you've been looking for a while and you kind of have this pressure of getting a position. it
Yes.
can get it can get difficult
It
to
is.
be
I
forthright, and yeah.
Yes. I mean, I was very devastated because I'm like, having a child does not impact my abilities to do the job in any way,
Mhm.
right? So it just, initially I was very upset, but then I said, okay, everything happens for a reason. I talked it out, and I have a good friend in my husband, so
Mhm.
luckily we talked it out, and he's like, it's okay. You'll find something better. We'll get move on. Let's focus on the happy thing for now. And that's exactly what we did.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this means that when you got your PhD, you had your two daughters already,
Yes.
right?
When I took my walk, I had a 11-month-old.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. All right. And so maybe talk if you can talk to us, because there's the after, right? There's postdoc. Uh, and again, as a man, I don't, well, also, first, I haven't done a postdoc, but I've had
Mhm.
conversations about that. But I'd like you to talk about what parenthood has, what impact parenthood may have had at the different steps that came after the
Yes.
PhD.
Yes. So I think the biggest takeaway for me from my PhD and having kids during that time was how, like I said, how much my priorities changed. And now I was not really aiming to go into a tier 1 research university anymore,
Hmm.
because it was that pull. I'm like, okay, this constant struggle between, do I want to be home with the kids, or do I want to just have successful publications? That was, I think it was very clear to me by then. I wanted to do a little bit of both,
Hmm.
right? This, and I want both. So one big decision I had taken by the time I started applying for jobs and taking interviews was that I wanted to go into a more like a teaching university or
Okay.
teaching research, equally distributed teaching research university than a more research oriented university only. That was the first big decision I took.
Hmm.
And that helped me streamline. And my first job right out of my PhD was at a liberal arts college in
Okay.
Orlando, Rollins. And I loved that this place was small. There was, not many students, not much of faculty. There was no pressure to, like, okay, I have to, no publish or perish there.
Hmm.
So it helped me gain footing. And, I was like, okay, I can take a breather now. Right. Right. Because you see, I'm also international. So there's also this
Yes.
pressure of, okay, you have to find something right out of the gate, or it's going to become really difficult.
To stay. Yeah.
And unfortunately, actually, that's one of the reasons I did not venture out to do a postdoc.
Mm.
Um, I just couldn't take that chance, and okay, I said, let's try this, and luckily, it happened very quickly,
Hmm.
and like about 8 months before I graduated, I had a job. So I
Okay.
was so
Wow.
much more relieved. Yes, I think by November of this year, I had a job, and then I was graduating in May of next year.
Hmm.
So I was very relieved just
Of
on the
course.
onset of that. Um, and then
I,
yes,
I have a point. I have a question actually. So
yes.
I also don't have experience of small universities, smaller institutions, and I have had conversations where people have told me that, kind of like you, I didn't want, or as a researcher or as a young researcher wanting to go to a for a PhD, my objective was not to be in a big lab publishing a lot. It was working on this specific domain, and what I'm trying to say is I don't have any experience of these
Hmm.
universities, but it feels like for different people, or for specific people, these types of universities are actually a
Yes,
very good environment. And
yes.
now, given what you're telling me, do you uh, recommend, PhDs who are considering having a child during their PhD, that maybe that they look at these smaller institutions?
Okay, so it
I don't know if it's a
that
convoluted question, but
no, no. I think my answer is going to be convoluted more than the
okay.
question. So here's the thing, especially in computer science, there's a method to this madness. Okay,
Hmm.
to be very successful in terms of publications requires a team. I mean, they say it takes a village to raise a child. I say
Hmm.
it takes a village to do a PhD,
Hmm. Hmm.
because if so it's no more, a PhD is no more that tunnel vision rabbit hole thing where you dig yourself deep, and when you come out you're victorious and everybody realizes that you've done this wonderful thing. It's not just that. It's not depth anymore. It's a combination of depth and breadth. Why?
Hmm.
Because you have to be visible. There's so many of us researchers in different levels, and if you want to be noticed, if you want to be known, because it's more like how popular or how visible are you that you get to be on panels, you get to be on conferences,
Hmm.
that really helps you in your job search, helps you in defining your career in academia, right?
Okay.
So if you already have that circle, so let's say you have a group of 6 lab mates and you're all working together, by the time you graduate, you will have multiple publications. In my case, it was different because I
Hmm.
did not work with a lab. I did not. I was the only student at that time for my advisor.
Okay.
And it was, I didn't realize at that time it was a disadvantage. But looking back, I think that was one of the things that I would have changed, I would have
Okay.
done differently. So if you already have that group, then please participate actively, because that is going to help you so much more than you think right now. But if you don't and you're thinking, okay, I'm not sure, is this right for me? Then please do explore private colleges, smaller universities, because right now, so what TCU does, it's called a teacher scholar model. And I love that
Okay.
about TCU, because we emphasize on both teaching and scholarly activity in the same level, right?
Okay.
And to me, that's what makes me, that's one of, it's playing on one of my biggest strengths, where I can take any complicated topic and break it down for
Hmm.
students who are just coming out of high school into their very first semester in college. And But I love doing research too. It's just I don't want to be married to my research in a way. So
Hmm.
it's a perfect balance. I still have time with the kids. I get to do mentoring, teaching, volunteering, and I get to contribute in terms of research.
Hmm.
So, yes, if you are considering having children or you have kids and you're exploring, that's definitely a very, very good option to go look. Because I think what we think as when we're applying for jobs is, oh my God, this is not a good university. Nobody's heard about it. You don't know how it is unless you take a chance.
Hmm.
So don't look at the name of the university and decide that, okay, this is not me. Just give it a shot. At least go feel the place. And
Hmm.
that's what I felt when I did. When Rollins, it was a small university, um, small college. TCU is bigger than Rollins, but it's still considerably my type, if you will.
Very good.
Yeah.
So this kind of confirms what I was thinking, and I think because I had had these conversations outside of the context of raising a family and having children, but I think it does apply, and of course I always advise any PhD candidate to do this work of talking to people who are in the lab, to um, uh, past team
Yeah.
members of the lab, and to the PI, of course, but to really get a feel of where they're going, because it's going to be a long, not a marriage like you were saying, but it's a long relationship. So you
Yes.
better be sure, and
Yes.
depending on your values, on your priorities in life, maybe
Hmm.
that can, choosing different types of institutions in
Yes.
terms of scale can make the PhD a smoother experience for you.
Yes. Yes.
Now, my question to you, and we're kind of reaching the end of the interview, but my question to you is, because the question was at the beginning, let's say, of the interview, was, are things changing for the better? And your story is quite recent,
Hmm.
and I wonder whether in the time when your adventure and parenthood started until today, if you're seeing things happened in terms of of this question of
Hmm.
the openness of institutions to accept women with everything a woman can be, including a mother.
Hmm.
Uh, do you see things changing for the
To an-
better?
I would. There's no clear yes or no here. I
Hmm.
think it's a yes and no, right? Yes, because there are institutions, there are people who are honestly striving to make that difference, to actually say, look, there's so much that I think COVID has helped that quite a bit. There's so much going on. Apart from this role that this woman is doing, apart from being a lecturer, well, professor, a researcher, there's this entire other life that she's having to lead. And it takes so much of her time and energy to do that also. Um, but also, I think it is up to us as women to feel, okay, what are the resources available to me? What can I take advantage of? Who should I contact? Who should I talk to? It's not, it takes two to tango. It's not just
Hmm.
the institution or the department trying to, well, okay, we're supportive, but they don't really know until you tell them how they can support you best, right?
Hmm.
So, for example, my department right now, I'm very lucky, I think, when I can say that my department chair was considering, okay, you have two young kids. How do you want your schedule to look like? Would you like to have your classes on, as minimum number of days as possible so that the other days you have a little more flexibility? I love that, right?
Hmm.
Because to me, that's wonderful. That's very considerate. Instead of saying, all right, this is how we're going to roll and you can figure out what you want to do, but this is how concrete and fixed we are going to be.
Hmm.
That's a very good starting point for me. Um, but I'm going to say it's also up to you to tell your story correctly. So you don't have to say, oh my God, I'm doing so much and you're not doing anything to appreciate me. But you could just say, this is me, right? Talk about your accomplishments. I always tell my students this: for someone who has been having a wonderful phase in their life, it's a normal thing to get up and get out the door every single day. But for someone who's battling depression or anxiety or something in their mind, something that's not okay, for them, it's a big achievement that they wake up and get out the door and appear normal.
Hmm.
So unless you tell your struggles, you tell your story, you tell what you've overcome, you can't expect others to appreciate the entirety of you because they don't know so much about you.
Hmm.
So yes, there is a lot of reception right now. People are listening, people are trying to help, but it's also you have to tell your stories. We have to bring to the front that, look, this is how life looks like, and how can we help, right? Or where should both of these meet?
Hmm. So some
Yeah,
self advocacy.
advocacy.
Mm.
And that really helps others. So when I say, okay, if I'm the only one saying, oh my God, it's very difficult to be a mom and be in academia, then I look like the odd one out. But if
Hmm.
we are a collective group saying, "What, we need to pay attention to this fact that there's so much going on. Maybe we can help mothers in academia somehow, or even parents, any parent, male or female, in academia. Maybe they have a child who needs more attention, or
Hmm.
maybe they have something else that's really important to them. How can you help sustain them through all of that?"
Hmm.
But if you don't speak up as a collective group, you won't get help, or you
Hmm.
won't be recognized.
Yeah, no, it does make sense, and it makes me wonder. So, in your advocacy for girls, women, mothers in computer science, is there an organization? Is there a platform where people are having conversations, where people are telling their stories, or is there still nothing organized in that
There's
sense?
nothing organized. There is some research that I'm participating in, as a uh, I'm an interviewee. I'm not the one leading the
Hmm.
research, but apart from that, and I think what is surprising to me most is, especially in computer sciences, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of discussion or
Hmm.
talk about, um, as a woman, this is my journey, these are the things that I needed help with. How can I help junior researchers because they're going through the same exact thing?
Hmm.
So right now, I don't have any particular place that I go and volunteer. So I am in different places volunteering and showing people how much it takes, what it takes, but how doable it is to
Hmm.
be in a position like mine.
Mm. Well, and I hope this conversation on Papa PhD is going to be part
I
of
do
that
hope.
effort. But I do feel that it kind of, to me, it kind of is saying that something like that should be created, because you see a lot of things happening. Let's say I've had a couple of guests and people I know talking about organizations of women who are CEOs, let's say,
Hmm.
and who are actually those who are more advanced are helping the ones who are more junior. A little bit like
Yes,
you were saying,
yes, yes,
like you were saying. So I think
yes.
it's an inspiring message of
Mm.
uh, of, of first things can change. There
Mhm.
needs to be some self advocacy, but it feels to me that you could start a group of some sort.
I will. Sometime I hope I do, but yes, and it's I don't know where I got that idea from, but somehow I was thinking that, what if, sometime in the future when I do, but what if we could say that, all right, you're an accomplished professor level position right
Mhm.
now. You've been through this. If you can extend and say, all right, I will take on one junior researcher who's a woman or who's a person who has kids, and I will help them, because it feels so much easier when you join a group.
Mm-hmm.
than to form a group on your own. Like, so in my instance, for example, I moved to TCU and now I have to build a student community
Of
for my
course.
research. But it would be so much easier if someone else from a different university came forth and said, just like mentoring, right? And said, okay, why don't you join for a year or so? Why don't you be part of our group and see what you can do, where you can help? And then maybe we'll get something mutually beneficial from that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right now, I don't know. I've reached a few, and I feel like everybody, or women or mothers in academia, are trying to fight their own isolated battles.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow I want to bring them all together. I'm just not sure where to start and how, with everything on my plate right now.
Well,
Right.
people who are listening, women who are listening, reach out to Krishna, because Krishna, you are on LinkedIn. You're
I am on LinkedIn, yes.
easy to find. Krishna P Kadiyala.
Kadiyala.
I will put your LinkedIn page in the show notes.
Hmm.
If you have the time, the energy, or ideas, or if you're already a group maybe close
Hmm.
by that you don't know, reach out to Krishna,
Please
because
do.
clearly there's potential to make something grow and to make something out of this.
Right. Yes.
Now, just as we finish, if there is someone out there, maybe pregnant and worried to reveal it, maybe really wanting to have kids, but not being able to decide, or or feeling that it's not okay. Uh, do you have some last words of inspiration or encouragement for them?
Sure. First of all, I think we're very strong. If you have if you have the ability to mother a child, I think you can do anything in the world. It gives you so much strength. It takes a mountain of effort. And if you are pregnant or you're worried and you're confused, find someone, maybe in your department, outside your group of friends, someone who can actually let you talk your heart out. Like, no judgment, no conditional talking. Just
Hmm.
because, for one, when you find that someone you can talk to and put your fears into words, it somehow clarifies exactly what you're fearing,
Hmm.
right? It just makes it so much better and say, okay, am I anxious? What am I anxious about? What am I worried about? And then you're like, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? And if you have a worst thing that can happen, find the solution for it first. That's going to solve half the troubles in your mind, or maybe 90% of the troubles in your mind, right? And just, again, LinkedIn is a wonderful resource. I
It
was
is.
late in realizing that, but I'm
Mhm.
so glad I did. Find people that you can talk to, and total strangers are wonderful listeners. Trust me, you
Mhm.
don't have to know them. Just tell them what's going on, and they'll give you a mountain of information that's wonderful, that's going to motivate you, help you. Maybe they can do something that you probably did not even think was a possible idea, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So don't, big advice, don't stick to yourself. Don't keep it inside.
Mhm.
Find someone to talk to, and then find your worst fear, and then see how, okay, what's the best thing I can take if that happens? What's my plan
Mhm.
B, right? And just do it. I mean, we're very strong.
I love it. I really love it. It's a great way to end this conversation, because it's a very strong point. But it makes me think of mental health. If actually
Yes.
your doubts are bringing you to depression or
Hmm.
extreme anxiety, also be sure to make use of whichever resources you
Right.
have around you in university that
Hmm.
are offered, or you look for professional help, because
Yes.
there's nothing that's more precious than your mental
Yeah.
health, and that is a priority. An
Hmm.
important point of what you said is that these people you're going to talk to, it's important that they're not in your direct circle of research, let's say, and
Hmm.
especially not that they're not people who are hierarchically connected to you in any
Yes.
way, because
Yes.
then there's
No.
limits to what you can
Exactly.
talk about. I really love the idea of talking to a total stranger,
Yeah.
although well, with with conditions. because they're totally unattached to
Hmm.
the outcome, to the context, and they might come with a great idea
Right.
that you didn't think
Yeah.
about. Really, really like it.
The unfortunately, what happens is because when we're fighting our battles, we're so connected to it that we forget to take a step back and help
Hmm.
that person fighting the battle. Right. And my mom always used to say, you should detach yourself from the situation, take a bird's eye view, assess the
Hmm.
situation, find how you would help someone else who's in that situation.
Yeah.
That's when you actually are giving your best advice and your best suggestions. And I'm going to put this out there for in terms of mental health. I had postpartum depression after my second child
Hmm.
through writing my thesis, and I was not brave enough to say it out loud up until now,
Hmm.
honestly. So
Hmm.
if you are experiencing something like that, it's normal. It's okay. 90% of us don't want to show it out because maybe we're perceived as failures, maybe we're perceived as weak. But no,
Hmm.
if you have fought it in the past or you're fighting it now, that makes you even more stronger.
Hmm.
So, yes, feel
I,
free to
I,
reach out to me.
all
But
right.
yes,
Well, this is an even better, I think, moment to end the interview, because I think it's a really, really important point, and I think we'll end on that. Krishna, thank you so much for being first open to having people reach out to you. It's really, really, really generous of you. Thanks for this time, and for talking about this, and sharing about your experience in a quite vulnerable way. And I'm super, super happy again that we connected and that this conversation happened.
me too. I'm very, very grateful that I'm here. And thank you for that opportunity, David, because it's very important for me, finally, that I had to share my story. And
Hmm.
it might not be the best one out there, but if there's anyone that I can help through my story, that's what I'm here for. That's the only reason I'm here for. But
Well,
thank you.
and I'm super, super grateful for it. And again, thank you.
Thank you.
Uh,
Wonderful.
so this ends the taping of the podcast per se. Thank you so much. This was really, really, really great. And yeah, I really hope that somehow there's some connections that are gonna happen, and also I wish that conversations like this happen
Mhm.
more and more. And I'm super happy that it happened
Yeah.
on the show.
Yes. I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity too. And it's been wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Cheers. So,
All right.
Krishna, I'm gonna now
Yes.
it's end the broadcast. Thanks for having been here. So this will now be available on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook for replay for anyone
Okay.
who wants to watch. I can send you
I'm going to have
the
my daughters
links.
watch it.
Yeah, I can send you the links. And for everyone who was watching or who's watching on the replay, thanks for having watched. I hope that you got something to take home from this conversation. If only a little inspiration, or if only Krishna's contact her. And so thank you for viewing, and thank you for listening. Um,
Thank you.
and so, Krishna, all the
Yes.
best for everything,
Thank you.
and I guess we'll keep in touch, right?
Yes. Yes. I will actually send you that imperfectionist book right now.
Perfect, and I'll put it in the
Yes.
show notes.
Great. Thank
So
you so much.